Sorcery. It's a lot of fun. With a wide range of different spells, sorcery builds give the player many options on how they want to approach the game. When you cast a sorcery, you consume focus points, or FP, which can be restored multiple times via flasks or consumables. But I wanted to see if this was even necessary and decided to beat the game with only sorceries without restoring FP. So the rules for this challenge are quite simple. First, I can only use sorceries, which are cast by a staff. To make it more interesting, I'm also not allowing any buffs that aren't passive or from a staff, so Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength and Commander's Standard, to name a few, are not allowed. Obviously, I can't restore FP, meaning no flask of Cerulean Tears, Cerulean Crystal Tear or Starlight Shards, so if I run out during a fight, that attempt is over. And lastly, I'll be trying to defeat all major bosses. So with that being said, let's get into the run. After starting as the astrologer class and doing some initial pickup of useful items, I took out the Pumpkinhead boss of Waypoint Ruins to get access to Selen. The sorceries she initially sells aren't very useful, but with the Royal House scroll from a nearby camp, I was able to purchase Curian Slicer, a melee sorcery that has the highest magic damage per FP consumed of any spell in the game. With FP so limited, especially in the early game, this seemed like an obvious choice to get started. I made a detour for the Demi-Human Queen's staff and headed for Margit. While my damage was good enough, I still had to be cautious of not missing too many casts. Nonetheless, Margit fell quite easily and I moved on to Stormvale Castle. Early on, I levelled as much mind as possible to give myself as many spellcasts as I could and went straight to Godric. Even with my early levels in mind, damage wasn't good enough to defeat Godric, so I left and made a detour to Caelid to collect some more items for the run. I got the Dectus medallion from Fort Faroth, said hi to Millicent, and collected Knight's Comet, Rock Sling, Staff of Loss, and the Meteorite Staff for later. I also made sure to get the Blue Dancer Charm from Limgrave Cave, which raises attack power with low equip load. With this and some more mines, I returned to Godric, defeated him, and then moved on to Leonia. After a quick sweep of Leonia, collecting the Cerulean Amber Medallion, the Curian Glintstone Staff and Intelligence Tier, I got the Academy Key and made my way into Ray Lucaria to fight the Red Wolf of Radahn. Even while having it in my offhand, the Curian Glintstone Staff still gives a 15% boost to sword sorceries, which includes Curian Slicer. With this, Red Wolf went down very easily, and I took a detour to get Comet and the Graven School Talisman. At this point, I was worried about my damage against Rennala due to her high magic resistance, so instead opted for more setup. I got the magic tier from an avatar in northern Leonia, took the lift of Dectus to Altus Plateau, and climbed Mount Gelmir all the way to Volcanic Manor. I tried to get the Cerulean Hidden Tier from the Tree Spirit not too far from the manor, but at this point my damage wasn't high enough and I died in one hit. I still didn't have access to Lanedale, and if I couldn't fight Rennala, my other option was Radahn. I first needed to see how much damage I did to know if this was the... I needed to see how much damage do I do? Enough. So I have the damage but die in one hit. Easy. I just need to no-hit Radahn. Oh boy. Can I just say, this fight sucks. What a boss. Anyway, with that headache over with, I ventured to Volcanic Manor, eased past Ghost Loretta and completed Celevis's quest to obtain the magic Scorpion charm, which boosts magic damage by 12%. Now the capital was open, I took care of Draconic Tree Sentinel and headed inside. I collected some runes, got sniped, climbed a dragon and took down Ghostfree to get my final talisman pouch. I know this is a habit anytime I'm close to progression this run, but I left Morgott for now and got a few more items for later in the run. I decided to check Rennala to see if she was as bad as I thought, and after running out of FP, I left Ray Lucaria and collected Margit's Shackle and Marcus Scarseal. I tried fighting Morgott straight up with just carrying Slicer, but soon realised that Margit's Shackle for phase 1, followed by range spells in phase 2 trivialised this fight, and the Omen King went down. Next, I went back to Rennala for another attempt, but this time I had a better idea. While it is a sorcery, Rock Sling doesn't do magic damage, but instead does physical damage, which bypasses Rennala's biggest strength. The fight was much easier this time and she went down, now giving me access to arguably the best staff in the game. Before doing that, I activated Radahn's Great Rune, which would give a 15% boost to max FP when active, and made my way to the mountaintops of the Giants. My first stop was the Stargazer's Ruins, where I summoned the jellyfish. After buying the Spirit Bell and making the long trip back to the ruins, I summoned Aurelia and acquired the Primal Glintstone Blade, reducing the FP cost of sorceries by 25%. This took the cost of Carrion Slicer from 4 FP to 3, which may seem insignificant, but it took my max casts from 67 to 89. Not bad. Before continuing, for the 500th time this run, there's some more setup. I did Vare's quest to get the Somber 10 in Mogwin, maxed out the Carian Regal Scepter, and collected Comet Azure, the Cerulean Hidden Tear and Ritual Sword Talisman. Selen's quest rewarded me with Shard Spiral, which would be useful later, as well as Azure's Armour, whose headpiece boosts damage to Comet Azure by 15%. Side note, it was around this point I realised Blue Dance Charm didn't affect sorcery damage, and that I had been wasting a talisman slot like an idiot for the past 6 hours. Anyway, with almost the last setup in this run complete, I went to Lord of Blood, and I think you all know where this is going. With that done, I quickly picked off the Regal Ancestor and made my way to Deeproot Depths via the Frenzy Flame route to take on Via's gang squad. I eased past them, completed Rani's questline and took down Estelle to gain access to the Moonlight Altar. The main purpose of coming here is for the Lunar Estate ruins, which house the +2 variant of the Cerulean Amber Medallion for even more FP. And after Haligtree medallions, beating the Nox duo for Lusat's staff, and getting the Graven Mass Talisman in Snowfields, I'm glad to say that setup is finally done. Now it was time to work through the rest of the Remembrance bosses, starting with the Rot Goddess. Passing through Ordina caused a bit of trouble, okay, a lot of trouble, and I entered Miquella's Haligtree. I dealt with Loretta and she dealt with us before descending into Elfile towards Malenia. I was really nervous about this fight since, well, it's Malenia, but luckily I've gotten better at this fight with time and I took her down no hit on my first attempt, being rewarded with 624,000 runes. Back to mountaintops, and Fire Giant caused more issues than I expected, but went down thanks to some Phase 2 Comet spam. I hugged some fingers before burning myself at the forge and ran straight for Godskin Duo. By this point in the run, we have astronomically high damage and more than enough FP, so all fights just boil down to not getting hit, which is easy enough for the duo. Before fighting Malekith, I figured now's a better time than ever to deal with the dragon bosses and return to Deeproot for an encounter with Fortisax. Apologies to anyone, including myself, that loves Fortisax's Phase 2 music because, yeah, Fortisax never stood a chance. Now it was Placidusax's turn to get melted, and it's all thanks to Shard Spiral. While this sorcery moves around a lot and has a hard time staying on smaller enemies, against larger, stationary bosses it absolutely shreds, and Placidusax didn't even get a chance to teleport. Following that, I quickly rushed through Malekith, Gideon and Toralu with some good old spell spam and warped to Volcanic Manor. There are only 2 Remembrance bosses left. One of them is the final boss, and the other I have been worried about since the start of the run, putting it off until now. I blasted my way through Godskin Noble and reached Rykard, the ultimate challenge of this run. Since this is sorcery only, I can't use the Serpent Hunter, and how much HP does Rykard have across his 2 phases? 89,613. Even if I could reliably connect Karin Slicer, my highest damage spell, with its 125 casts, I would still be about 20,000 damage short. With that in mind, my only option was status effects. You know how I said setup was done? Turns out I was lying. After testing the Thorn sorceries for bleed potential and realising they were dreadful beyond belief, especially considering it's nigh on impossible to hit with them, I settled on Glintstone Ice Crag to deal Frostbite. I went and cleaned up the remaining bosses in Snowfield, Mountaintops and Dragon Barrow for as many runes as possible and respec'd into a more suitable build with enough health to actually survive a hit this time. With the Snow Witch hat giving a 10% boost to cold sorceries and 3 hours of testing, I was finally prepared to take on Rykard. Radahn's Great Rune active and starting with the Cerulean Amber Medallion +2, I entered the fight with 465 focus points. For the Serpent phase, I used Glintstone Ice Crag to get Frost procs, followed by Rock Sling, buffed by the Meteorite Staff to deal physical damage. At the end of the phase, I swapped my entire build into maximum damage, disregarding any increased FP consumption for now, and drank my physic containing the hidden tear. And then... either Rykard would attack me, or I could utilise the full duration of the tier to the max. After my time with Commodore was up, I swapped everything back to my previous setup to reduce FP consumption. I returned to Ice Crag and Rock Sling and repeated my phase 1 strategy, hoping I had left myself enough FP from phase 1 to close out the fight. This was a stressful final phase, especially after I wasted some Ice Crag spells at the start trying to be greedy. The fight may have only been 5 minutes, but it felt like far longer until finally, with 11 FP remaining, the Lord of Blasphemy was felled. Now that the Rykard ordeal was finally over, I entered the Archery to take on the final bosses, Radahn and Elden Beast. Within the tree, I made quick work of Radahn before nearly dying to the Space Lug by testing out different sorceries instead of just defeating it. And with that final hit from Night's Comet, I had beaten all Remembrance bosses in Elden Ring with only sorceries without healing FP. A bit anticlimactic, I know, but it was to be expected after our build had become so powerful. Looking back at it, while this challenge run may not have been the most difficult ever, it did force me to rethink strategies for bosses and use items that I hadn't used casually. I also no-hit Radahn and Malenia for the first time, so that was a bonus, but it just goes to show how powerful sorcery can be in this game when utilised properly. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, consider leaving a like or subscribing for more challenge runs like this in the future. That's all from me. Have a good one.